So in this video, I want to share with you the meanings that you can get from your toes. Each toe has a totally different meaning than the one beside it. There are 5 toes on each foot, and these have sort of main categories. Within the main categories, like for example, you have your big toes here, and then you have your second toes, third, fourth, fifth. So those categories there's a main heading for each of these. But on the right side of the foot and the left side of the toes, basically, right? The right side, the right toes and the left toes have a different perspective. And what I mean by that is the simple fact of how when I'm moving my hand like this, it's actually firing in this side of my hemisphere of the brain, right? And if I'm moving this hand over here, it's firing over here. So there's a switchover that happens that controls the opposite side of the body. And what's interesting about this is the hemispheres of the brain operate slightly different, right? To basically keep us alive and make us, be able to get through this world that we live in a way that we can, uniquely walk through it, right? So the left side of the brain here is more of our control, our survival brain. So when we're under stress and that, this hemisphere takes over, and we go into, sort of survival mode. Whereas this side over here is more of the creative side. So once, stress is a little bit off our system and we're feeling okay, we can kind of think of creative ways to work through the issues that we need to, right? So there's a bit of a different perspective when you're dealing with the 5 categories of the toes. So let's get into what each of those categories are. So the first one we're going to look at is the big toes. The big toes represent our thoughts, right? The element that's put to it is ether, right? So, thoughts come out of thin air, right? And we get ideas that, inspiration and stuff like that seem to come from nowhere. So the element there is ether. And so, our thoughts on our big toes here have to do with our core beliefs, our intellectual power, our intuition, our ideas, etc., etc. So anything to do with thoughts and thinking that way. If we're kind of doing the little brain swap thing, and that the right side has to do with more of kind of like our joy in our life, and left side has to do with our, sort of sorrowy type emotional thoughts and stuff like that. So another thing to think about as well, just so it's easy to remember, is there can be some easy actions to remember. So if we're thinking about the big toes and we forget, like, oh yeah, what was it again? Which is its thoughts, right? You can think of it as, giving somebody a thumbs up. So when we hear something like, oh, that's a really good idea, or something that we agree with, what do? We give a thumbs up, like, oh yeah, great, sounds good. But if we don't like an idea or something, we put thumbs down. So that's an easy way to remember that the big toes, which are related to the thumbs and hands as well, because they're both on zone 1, are related to thoughts, okay? So thumbs up, thumbs down. Thoughts. Good. Number 2, we're going to look at these, which are in our hands, our pointer fingers, and in our feet, they're obviously the second toes. And this has to do with our feelers, our feelings toes, right? So these toes represent our feeling, and the element that goes with this is air, right? So it's sort of more emotional, sort of feeling and stuff like that is related to air quality, right? So these toes mirror our emotional aspects, right? Basically, it's also the way that we get in touch with the things that we're interested in, with ourselves and also with others, right? So it's how we sort of dive deep into how we're feeling. There are feelers, things like that. The link that I like to think about how to remember this one is, if somebody kind of hurts your feelings or something like that, you start to point fingers, right? Like, they hurt me, or, I did something or they did something, right? So the pointer finger is like feeling. When you're feeling sort of upset about something, you feel like you need to point it out, right? So that's a good way to remember it there. So your feeling toes. The right side has to do with your desire, feelings of desire, and left side is more like just your raw emotions, right? That sort of thing there. So number 2 is feeling toes. Number 3, third toe, is our action, right? These are our doing toes. These are kind of our, we have ideas and we want to move them into action or not, right? So these are the energy of, moving us into a direction, right? So physically getting us there, right? So if we have ideas about something that we want to do, if the toes, they have a lot of power in them, we're going to just jump right in and start moving forward with whatever idea that we thought was really great, right? And the element here is fire, right? So it's like that fiery, creative energy to get us going. The link that I like to remember is, if you're going down your path, you're in your action, you're trying to get somewhere and somebody cuts you off, what do? You automatically, raise your middle finger and give them the finger, right? So it's like, that's a good one to remember. It's immediate action to somebody else's, sort of, responding right away in a physical way. And it's can be like a lot of aggression and fiery kind of, and up goes the middle finger. So that's a good way to remember it. Our right side, right third toe has to do with like aggression more. So that's sort of another little subtopic there. And our left has to do with more creativity, right? So these can work really well together there. Third toes have to do with action. So our fourth toes represent our relationships, right? So it reveals our inner chatter of how it is that we, that affect our relationships that we're in, and relationships with ourselves, relationships with others. So it's how we relate to, again, like ourselves or others or the situation that we're in. The element here is water. So, water is kind of movable and just water-like qualities have to do with relationships. The way that I like to remember this one is we tend to put a wedding ring on our fourth finger, right? Or engagement ring, stuff like that. So to show that we're in a relationship. So interesting enough. So the fourth toes, easier way to remember is, the wedding ring usually goes on this finger here, right? The right side has to do with attachment. Left has to do with more love. So fourth toes are our relationship toes. So what is the fifth and final, the pinkies, actually represent? Well, this represents our family, right? These are our family toes. So anything sort of showing up there reveal how it is that we see our family. And family extends to our society, their societal beliefs, the area and community that we grow up in. They sort of build these, I like to call it like structures, right, that we kind of follow. So an interesting enough fact is if you actually end up losing your pinky toe, because a lot of times we don't think they're even that important, but if we somehow lose our pinky toe in some kind of accident or something like that, we actually have to learn how to walk again. So we have to learn and restructure the way that we walk when we don't have our pinky toes operating. So just kind of an interesting thing there as well. So yeah, again, this has to do with our structure of the society and where we are and how we are in that society and the beliefs that have been, that we've accepted or thrown out, right? So this has to do with family, like the bigger family. The element here is earth, and the link that I like to think about how to remember this It's kind of like, you know, with your sisters and stuff, you kind of, brothers and stuff like that, you do a pinky swear, right? You kind of, you know, swear on your family and make a promise that way. So it's kind of like, that reminds me of family when you kind of do the pinky swear, right? And so the right side, right pinky, has to do with fear, and the left has to do with trust. So having all this information can be a bit overwhelming, but just remember the 5 main categories and you'll be good to go. And then if you understand the sort of crossover that happens, you can kind of play with the ideas and ask the client questions about you know, different aspects of, you know, control or sort of creativity and things like that. So again, to go over quickly, the areas are, you know, your thumbs up, which are your thoughts, right? Your pointer fingers, which are your second toes, are your feelers, right? Middle ones, if somebody cuts you off, you tend to extend your middle finger. That has to do with your action, right? Fourth, you put the wedding ring or some kind of ring on there to show you're in a relationship. Fourth has to do with relationships. And our pinky swear has to do with our families, right? Our families, our structure of society, our bigger families, things like that. So hopefully that kind of helps. So when you're looking at clients' feet or you're looking at your own, kind of see the difference in like the right side versus the left. See if the toes are twisted, or just see if anything sort of sticks out, and that would be an indication of what that toe is trying to communicate to you, right? With the main category of, say, if a lot of people tend to get their pinky toes kind of hiding underneath like this, right? Or they're kind of like shying away. And so there could be some kind of relationship or some kind of issue there with their families, right? Or with the society that they're in, something like that, right? But only the client knows, the person that you're working with or yourself, if you're looking at your own toes, kind of knows what that means, right? So that's what I like about this stuff, is it gives you main sort of categories and stuff to play with, but ultimately it's the person you're working with, it's the person that you're, you know, looking at your own feet, that knows the real answers and gets insight into if they want to correct the path that they're walking on, right? So there you go. Hopefully that helps. Meanings in the toes, 5 categories. There you go. If you're interested in learning more about reflexology, you could subscribe to the channel below. It's also very helpful to hit that like button, and feel free to share it with anybody who you think might be interested in it. You can find my online courses, Reflexology Charts, and other reflexology goodies over on my website, which is balancingtouch.ca. Thank you so much for watching today, and if you have some more time, you can check out some other videos. Till next time, this is Adam Thomas from balancingtouch.ca. See you later.